So looking at 11.3, we're just looking at the different forms of digital media and their impact on health and well-being. So we finished our brainstorm. We've looked at this idea that COVID has led to the development of different apps that we can, access in order to know where the exposure sites are, in order to know, whether a place that we've recently been to has become an exposure site, basically preventing that spread of infectious disease and infectious spread. Okay, we also know that COVID, although COVID is more of a physical disease, can anyone just brainstorm in the chat box, what are other kind of impacts do you think COVID has had on our population as a whole? So we know that obviously there are physical impacts if you get COVID or if you contract a positive case of COVID, but what other impacts are there in terms of the other dimensions? Mental health impacts? Yeah, can anyone give me an example of like a mental health impact that we would associate with COVID? Even just a word. Yeah, depression. People who have developed COVID or people whose loved ones have developed or contracted COVID have been, known to have increased cases of stress, anxiety, and that has led to depression or mental health issues. Okay, so mental health, we can talk about anxiety, we can talk about stress. We can also talk about social. Yeah, there's definitely social health impacts because COVID has led to a lot of us, having to be in isolation or having to quarantine or having to be in lockdown where we can't really see people beyond a certain number of kilometers. So there's reduced social interactions. With you guys, you've basically not even been at school for most of the year now. So you've not been able to see your friends. You've not been able to have a normal kind of VCE or a normal year 10 or year 11 there. So it's really important for you to remember that COVID is one of those things that has affected social health. We can look at the economy as well in terms of the amount of money that's going towards the economy. The economy is getting weaker, even though the government is trying their best to, promote it because people are at home. We don't have as many international students coming into the country anymore. So obviously our economy is not really at its best. We can also talk about spiritual. That's a good one as well. Spiritual health and well-being. People are not able to, for example, go to mosque. They're not able to go to Jummah prayer. They're not able to go to their weekly, halakas or their weekly Islamic discussion circles they might be in and that kind of stuff. They might not be able to even meet with people who they generally meet with. Okay, so that's the spiritual health and well-being side of things, that you're not able to go to those things because all of those religious places of worship have been closed. Okay, so that's the basic idea with how COVID has affected the other dimensions of health and well-being. Important to remember, guys, because COVID has actually led to the development of so many apps that are digitized. Okay, one of the reasons is we can't have health programs happening in real life when we have so much COVID and stuff around us, and so having these health apps is one way we can still transmit that information to many people, but without having to worry so much about meeting those people face to face. Just getting them to download an app from the comfort of their own home allows them to get that. Now I feel like my laptop is going to die any minute, so I'm just going to go and plug this. So just give me 1 second. I will pause the recording while I get my charger. Yep, so basically that's looking at this idea that COVID as well, in conjunction to everything else we're going through in this world, has actually contributed to an increase in digital apps and an increase in applications that can help us to protect all dimensions of our health and well-being online, okay? Even something like Zoom. No one knew about Zoom before COVID came up. Well, it did exist, but no one used it. But now Zoom is it's like second nature to us. It's like something we know like the back of our hand. So all of these things, it's really important to remember, are the result of the world that we live in and the increasing need for digital media. Okay, but we know obviously even before COVID came to be, we were still pretty reliant on digital media. Okay, in terms of, accessing social media, in terms of things like websites, in terms of mobile apps, we've always been quite reliant on digital media to give us all these different kind of like avenues with which we can rest, with which we can work, with which we can play. Okay, so basically very important to remember that digital media has always been a part of the current generation and how they've lived their lives, in other words. Okay, so these are just some examples of digital media, just to introduce you to what digital media actually is. The more important thing that we need to go through, though, is just looking at some examples of actual health-based health applications of these digital media. So how these digital media examples have been used for a health-related purpose, okay? One example is the COVID apps that we've looked at, okay? We can also talk about telehealth, okay? In your textbook, they call this the technology-based patient consultations. But if you've ever had a doctor's appointment or your parents have had a doctor's appointment in recent times, most doctors now are opting to use telehealth. What that means is that you book an appointment with the doctor, but you don't actually go to the doctor clinic or to the medical center. You literally just book the appointment and then they call you back. And some doctors do video conferencing, but most doctors, it's just on the telephone, like on the mobile, just like, audio. So obviously telehealth is a safer way to, if we're looking at today's situation with the whole COVID issues, it's a safer way to prevent any risk that the patient or the doctor might experience by having a face-to-face consultation, okay? Before COVID, though, telehealth was also still used, but mostly by people who lived in like rural and remote areas who couldn't otherwise drive so far away. It was easy for them to use telehealth to look at, non-urgent or non-emergency related medical issues, as well as time. So some people who work maybe night shift or who work during very different time periods of the day, it would have been easier for them to book a telehealth in between their shifts and have a quick session compared to, spending 2 hours in the waiting room after work when they're already tired and they don't have enough time to even make dinner when they get home. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So remembering telehealth is one of the digital applications. Another digital application that helps to improve our health and well-being, when I say application, I don't mean like a digital app, I mean like a way in which health can be digitized, or a way in which we can digitize healthcare in order to improve health and well-being. Okay, so another way we can do this is through symptom checkers. There's a lot of websites now, as well as mobile applications that you can download onto your phone that actually have symptom checkers. And we had this with the COVID-19 as well. When COVID-19 first came out last year, on the COVID-19 app, they actually had a symptom checker where there'd be like little boxes like, are you feeling? And then there'd be like sore throat, runny nose, lack of taste, loss of smell. And you just have to tick. You put a little tick next to each of those. Okay, that is an example of a symptom checker, because when you are checking off those number of symptoms, it might then give you a quick diagnosis that you are at a high risk of COVID, get tested immediately. Or if you didn't tick any of those boxes, it might say something like, you are at no risk or at a very low risk of COVID, there is no need to get tested. Okay, so essentially those symptom checkers can give people a very quick and easy way to give people a peace of mind. Okay, especially people who don't have access to a GP. Remember, not everyone lives in a suburban or metropolitan area where they can access GPs very quickly. One example of a symptom checker is the COVID-19 symptom checker on the app. You can also talk about Health Direct. This is the one your book talks about. So Health Direct is the Australian government website. Again, important to know that a lot of these health apps are Australian based, because what is a priority in Australia is going to be different from what is a health priority in America, or what is a health priority in Brazil, or what is a health priority in Bangladesh. Okay, it's different depending on which country you're in. Okay, so basically Health Direct is an Australian government website. It's got a symptom checker that allows someone to plug in their information and then gives them advice about whether they need to see a GP, a pharmacist, or an emergency department of a hospital. So you can either learn the COVID-19 example one, or you can learn the Health Direct example. Either example will work there. Okay, so that's symptom checkers and technology-based patient consultations. So these are two examples of how digital media can be used to improve health and well-being. Okay, if we go to the next one, mobile apps. So we already talked quite a bit about mobile apps at the beginning, showing you guys the two examples of the COVID mobile apps that were published or were released to help people to understand where exposure sites and everything were. We've also got other mobile apps as well. Okay, so we've got mobile apps for allergies. For example, if you've got allergies to a particular, type of food like peanuts or something like that, these apps can actually help you track your symptoms. Exercise trackers, so this is related to things like Fitbit or Apple Watch and stuff like that. But you've also you don't even need to download like a smartwatch in order to understand what exercise tracking is like. You don't need to have, sorry, did I say download a smartwatch? Sorry, my brain is not working today. You don't need to buy a smartwatch is what I'm trying to say. You don't need to buy a smartwatch in order to download an app that allows you to track your exercise. For example, they've got apps nowadays that are just general exercise tracking apps, not affiliated with a brand like Fitbit or Apple or Garmin, but they're just general apps that you can download. The same thing with food logging apps. You don't need to, if you want to track your calories or track your food intake, you don't have to download an app that's affiliated with Fitbit. You can actually download really general apps nowadays that just allow you to track your food without having to shell out extra money for a brand new smartwatch or fitness watch. Okay, we've also got period trackers, which are often built into the smartwatches or fitness watches. You've got weight loss apps. Again, these are also often built into your smartwatch fitness apps as well. Okay, certain organizations also have health condition specific apps. For example, Beyond Blue deals with a lot of mental health issues and a lot of mental health promotion. Okay, they want to promote mental health within young people. They have an app called Beyond Now, which actually helps people who experience like suicidal thoughts and feelings. Also Quit, which you'll learn about a lot more next year, but Quit is involved with anti-smoking. You might have heard of the Quit line, for example, for smoking addiction. So they've actually got a My Quit Buddy app, which actually helps people who are trying to get rid of smoking or stop smoking to actually give them tips and strategies for how to best overcome their smoking habit. So those are some different examples, so many different examples of mobile apps that exist. So you can just talk about any of the ones that are in this little bit of information here, or even the ones we brainstormed at the beginning of the class. Anything will work as long as you're able to explain how does it promote health and well-being. That's about it. Okay. The second point here, general health and well-being websites and search engines, is a little bit more general. Okay, we're not looking at a specific app here. We're just looking at this idea that, let's say I'm experiencing dizziness every day, or I'm getting a headache every day after school. If I'm experiencing that and I put my symptoms into Google and it says, oh, you might be anemic, better you go get a blood test done, that information is health information, right? Sometimes we know that this information is not always 100% correct or accurate, but it gives me a little bit of a guide as to what I can do. Okay, if I'm someone who has zero health literacy or zero knowledge of the connection between nutrition and disease, I might not know that I could be anemic. I might not know that my iron intake could be very low. So getting this kind of information from a website or search engine like Google can give me that basic knowledge that I need, which can then guide me to decide, okay, do I want to book an appointment with a GP? Do I need to get a blood test done? What do I need to do? Where do I start? Okay, for a lot of people who don't have proper health information or health knowledge, knowing where to start can be the hardest bit for them. But if they know that, yes, my problem is serious enough that it does warrant or does require a blood test, they'll be more confident to go to their GP and book a blood test for themselves. Okay, other examples of common Australian-based websites, again, focusing on the idea that our website should always end in a .gov.au or a .edu.au or .org.au. Okay, these are official government websites, which are likely to be accurate compared to just a random website you find. So betterhealth.vic.gov.au is one, mydoctor.com.au, Better Health Channel, healthdirect.gov.au. All of these are websites that are most likely to be quite reliable because they're based on Australian information and they are moderated and regulated by the Australian government. So they are very, very likely to have good information and accurate information there. Okay, so that's just an example of how general health and well-being websites or search engines can give us basic health information that we need to make a proper decision. Okay, and then we're looking at this idea. So those are our main kind of four that we look at. Okay, so we look at 4 examples: technology-based patient consultations, aka telehealth, symptom checkers, mobile apps, general health and well-being websites and search engines. Now, from these 4, I would suggest that you learn at least 2. Okay, any 2. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Learn the 2 that are easiest for you to remember and the easiest for you to come up with examples for. Okay, remember that you want to learn one where you have enough information that you are able to also write a detailed answer. Since we're not making you learn all 4, at least learn 2 in proper detail. Okay, So that's the basic idea. And what I mean by proper detail is try to make sure you can link back to at least 2 or more dimensions of health and well-being. So how does mobile apps, for example, promote physical health and well-being, but how does it also promote mental health and well-being? Well, depending on the app, it can promote mental health and well-being, or it can promote physical health and well-being too. So you need to be able to give that kind of an explanation for the two that you decide to learn. Okay. All right, so the last 2 things that we're going to go through are the opportunities for health and well-being as a result of, adopting digital media, or as a result of digitizing health care, as well as the challenges. So when we're talking about the opportunities, guys, we're talking about what are the strengths or the advantages. In other words, what are the good positives about using digital media for health applications or health-based purposes? So we're looking at the plus points, in other words. One of the first things that is probably a pro of digital media is that digital media has always allowed people who live in very rural or remote areas of Australia to be able to overcome that issue of distance, or physical distance, or geographical location. It allows them to be able to download an app that helps them to track, the COVID exposure sites. It allows them to call their doctor, okay, who might be otherwise 2 hours away, to call them and actually speak to them on the phone, rather than making the 2-hour trip to reach that medical center. So it's always allowed people who live very far away, who live in rural or remote areas, to overcome the factor of distance. Okay, that's the first kind of pro, or the first strength or positive. The second positive of using digital media for healthcare or for health purposes is that it also allows for language barriers to be broken down. This is because a lot of, even when the COVID booklets and COVID information booklets were being sent around and were being posted on the government website, they were actually released in multiple languages, like Mandarin, you had Vietnamese, you had Hindi, you had all these different languages that they were released in. Okay. And so basically, even if you're not an English speaking, even if English is not your first language, you can still understand that information. Okay. Also, if you're seeking information online, we know about Google Translate. Google Translate can literally translate any words or paragraphs into your spoken language and can give you that information. And so you can understand that better. The third kind of plus or pro of digital media is that it also allows for the formation of online support groups through all these online forums. Okay, so you've got forums like Reddit, which are more general, but you've also got forums like, for example, health-related forums. And often these forums are on health websites themselves. Okay, so it's actually easier for you to talk to other people who have type 2 diabetes. If you've got type 2 diabetes yourself, rather than, trying to make like a social group where you meet face to face, which is going to be a lot more difficult to organize, it's easy for you to participate in online support groups where you can talk to other people who've gone through the same experiences, and they can give you tips and you can give them tips for how you deal with it and how you live with it. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So there's 3 pros or strengths on this page. Just learn any 2. The 2 that are easiest for you to remember. And I say learn 2 because if you technically forget 1, you'll have 1 to fall back on. Okay, so just learn any 2 opportunities. And remember, guys, in a question where whenever we ask you for the opportunities, because we will use this word when we write SAC questions or exam questions, whenever we ask you for the word opportunities, what are the opportunities that digital media and health purposes provide, you need to be able to give us the strengths. Opportunities is always a positive word. It's always related to something positive. So just remember, opportunities means you're talking about the positives or the strengths of that topic. Okay, in contrast now, we're looking at the negatives. So the negatives are basically the challenges. Okay, so remember the word challenges has a kind of like, it's not as positive as opportunities, right? So challenges is basically referring to what are the disadvantages or the drawbacks, or in other words, we could even say what are the cons of digital media in terms of health applications or health related purposes and using it for those health related purposes. So we're looking at the kind of minuses or the negatives or the cons of using this for a health purpose. Now, one of the main cons that we learned about in Unit 1 as well with reference to nutrition related information, but we can apply it for this too, is that the internet isn't always accurate. Okay, it doesn't always contain accurate information. Some of that information is false. Some of that information has been written by people who have a specific agenda, okay, who don't actually, who are not unbiased, who are actually quite biased and who have their own agenda, okay. For example, a lot of articles that are written by people who adopt a certain type of diet will often support that diet and kind of put down every other diet that exists out there. That's biased. That's not accurate. Okay, that's not giving you the whole picture. So a lot of the information that you obtain online, just like everything else online that can be inaccurate or can be misleading, health information can also be misleading. Okay, the second con or the second disadvantage or challenge that digital media presents for us is that sometimes people who share health tips online, they're not actual medical professionals. And this is the particular issue with things like social media, where literally anyone can start a live and anyone can be like, oh, hey, like I just had this smoothie for like 2 weeks and oh my God, I'm so healthy now. You know, anyone can literally give those kinds of tips. So you need to kind of always be looking at the credentials of the people who are presenting those tips. Not to say that really famous and really well-trained medical professionals are not on social media. A lot of them are coming onto social media now, but just need to double check your references and double check the sources just before believing everything that you read online. Also, for some particular kinds of medical conditions, reading something online or watching a social media post that someone has put online doesn't always replace a proper face-to-face consultation. So we need to remember that depending on how bad your medical condition is or how severe your health has declined, sometimes it's better to just book a telehealth appointment with an actual doctor or just have a proper face-to-face consultation. Okay, self-diagnosis is also a major issue. So this is like, for example, you go online and you Google something like, I don't know, the other day, what did I Google? I Googled right arm hurts or something like that. And it was like, oh, cancer. And I was like, oh my God, no. And then it was like, yeah, because sometimes, you know, it can be a little bit dramatic. The internet is very broad. Okay. The internet is a very broad thing. So you put in one search term and that could be, you know, that could say that you've got cancer to you've got, you know, arthritis to you've got this to you've got that. You don't know what the actual condition is. And that's why it's always better to go to a doctor face to face, because they can actually run the tests. They can actually do the things that will determine the actual issue that you have, rather than you self-diagnosing yourself with some issue, okay, and not knowing the whole picture and not running the proper medical tests. So that's another issue. And self-diagnosis often, or not often, always leads to a lot of anxiety and unnecessary stress. So it's always better to get a second opinion from an actual doctor. So these are some of the challenges, 3 particular disadvantages or challenges, or we could say cons or drawbacks of using digital media for health-related purposes. Another one that I'm going to add here, guys, just because we've continued to link everything back to COVID and the whole COVID thing, is that those COVID apps that I showed you at the beginning, change the color. Okay, certain apps, certain health-related apps, example, COVID-19 app, require a smartphone. And that too, the smartphone has to be like a recent software kind of smartphone. It can't be like one that you bought in like 2010 or something. Okay, so it's got to be a smartphone that's got some kind of recent software on it, okay? Because remember, some apps you can't download unless you've got like, I don't know, Android 8.0 or something like that. So not everyone owns a smartphone, believe it or not, okay? Especially people who are like elderly, people from low SES backgrounds. Okay, a lot of people who have just recently arrived in Australia who still have a migrant status, they might not have been able to buy a smartphone just yet. Okay, and so these people are actually disadvantaged or don't have equal access to those health informations that come from those apps because they don't have a smartphone. Okay, I know that that sounds hard to believe because, oh my God, everyone has a smartphone. How do you not survive? Like a smartphone is like, you know, it's like just as important to you as oxygen. That's how it is these days. I know, but you know, we have to remember that not everyone does own a smartphone. And that's why in front of Coles and stuff, sometimes now, they don't only have the QR codes, they have the physical kind of clipboards where you can actually write your name and your phone number and do the physical check-in rather than the online check-in. Okay, so some places have that. So this is something, another drawback that you might decide to talk about. Okay, so out of the 1, 2, 3, 4 drawbacks or disadvantages that you have, just learn any 2 on this slide or from this slide, okay? Any two will be enough. And just be able to explain how that acts as a drawback or how that acts as a challenge in terms of improving our health and well-being. Okay, so just get rid of all of that. All right, that basically covers 11.3 for today. So I'm just going to stop the recording here.